then we start, I'll ask one of my colleagues and see if they can hop on and record from this and go live from their side while we've already started. But in the meantime, we're going to start. Yeah, like I said, welcome to everybody. Please remain muted and keep your video off for as far and as much as you possibly can. And without any further ado, I would like to start by welcoming and thanking our speaker, Hannah Hopper, who will be moderating this session. Just a brief introduction. Hannah is a passionate advocate for sustainable development with a particular focus on sustainable cities and food systems. She has completed a diploma in sustainable development from Stellenbosch University in 2020 and is currently pursuing a postgraduate diploma in sustainable development through the Sustainable Institute in Stellenbosch, South Africa. Her studies have exposed her to complexity theory, the principles of ecoliteracy and sustainable design and technology, as well as endowing her with a theoretical and practical understanding of social entrepreneurship, which includes activation and engagement, social justice, and climate change. Hannah is currently working for the African Earth Rights as a communications and research assistant for the GIZ-funded Knowledge Hub for Organic Agriculture in Southern Africa and the South African Organic Sector Organization. In her personal capacity, she has worked with the nonprofit community-driven Scarborough Environmental Group to support the building of Sustainability Commons, a space of local low-tech experimentation. Here, Hannah started and has managed 2 environmental clubs every week for students from different backgrounds and ages. She represented South Africa at the 2020 Club of Rome Youth Summit as a moderator for discussions on framing economics. Hannah has been chosen as the South African delegate for the Y20, which is the G20 Youth Summit in 2021, for the topic of sustainability, climate change, and energy, which was held a week ago from the 19th to the 23rd of July. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us and educate us more on this topic, Hannah. So if you can just maybe introduce the topic a bit more and just unpack it for us, please.
Sure. Thank you so much, Katie, for the introduction and for having me. It's such a pleasure. And yeah, so the topic for today's discussion is sustainable cities and food systems. So to give you a broad background to this topic, we are currently living in the midst of a global polycrisis, which essentially means we have a multiple layers of interacting complex challenges. Complex challenges, as we know, are hard to understand, let alone to solve. And this has really led to the evolvement of the word sustainability and the need for a sustainable transition to a more just and inclusive world. So specifically in the context of Africa, urbanization, the trends of urbanization are increasing dramatically. And it's said by 2050 that Africa will have 290 million people, extra people in their cities. So urbanization planning needs to be at the forefront of this transition as well. And as well as this, our population in Africa is dramatically growing, which means more mouths to feed. And so we need to also ensure that our agricultural systems are serving our people, but also the planet at the same time. To just zoom out a little bit and to bring a positive side to the story, Africa as a continent is in a very unique position where we have been able to see the flaws in the development of the global north, and so we are able to look at those mistakes and innovate in a way that makes sense to our context. we also have the opportunity to leapfrog to more sustainable technologies, such as renewable energy. So we are now sitting at this crossroad where we can choose a more just and sustainable future for our continent. And it's really up to us as individuals to hold our leaders accountable and to also make sure that we're working on the ground to ensure we have a sustainable future for all.
Thank you, Hannah, for that, for introducing the topic in such layman terms. I think one of the things that always kind of gets me when talking about climate change and sustainability and global warming and all these things is that it always goes over people's heads. It's almost as though we're not supposed to understand what it actually is. So just in terms of building or designing sustainable cities, what would you say are some of the key elements that we should look at when not necessarily just judging whether or not a city is sustainable, but when wanting to actually design one from scratch?
Mm. Just to touch on your first point, the fact that people feel like sustainability is kind of detached from us. I really witnessed that in the difference between going to the gender-based violence protests in 2019 versus the climate protests that same year. And the energy was totally different. You know, at the gender-based violence protests, there was a lot of anger. There was this desire for immediate change. And then at the climate protest, it was more like, it was music, it was a completely different vibe. And I think that this is a slightly problematic because we need to be just as serious about climate change, but it is tricky when we're in a context where people are experiencing, lack of basic education, lack of access to basic services. So it is a tricky context to be in. But to go to your question, so what do we need to consider? What elements make a city sustainable? So here, I think it's important to first say that when we're talking about sustainability, we need to look at it from a holistic lens. So a lot of people correlate sustainability with just environmental challenges, but we need to look at the politics, economic, and social factors as well. But first, I would start with looking at the energy flows within a city. So what are the water systems like? What are the waste, electricity, and food systems? So when we look at water, we want to make sure that everyone has access to clean and safe water, while also ensuring that we do not run out of water. If you look at what happened in Cape Town a couple of years ago, we went through this enormous water crisis. And I think that was one of many crises to come in the future, where we start to, our access to resources is starting to become limited. And so I think it was a good wake-up call for everyone to go, actually, we need to start treating these resources more preciously. With waste, in South Africa, 50% of the weight of waste comes from organic waste, which, if you just had to tackle that, would be a simple thing to change. You know, it's interesting because someone mentioned to me like 2 years ago that waste is an unusual concept, because in nature there is no such thing as waste. Only humans have created waste. Yeah. So in nature, there's this thing like one man's trash is another man's treasure, you know? So we need to start rethinking how we deal with what we think is waste and actually see it as a resource. So turning organic waste into compost, for example, you know, and to grow nutritious, delicious food for people. Food, we're going to talk about a bit more. And electricity is one of the biggest parts of our transition towards a more sustainable future. The challenges around that, though, are that, especially in South Africa, it's a highly political, it's a big political debate, and it's extremely complex, but we know that we need to transition towards renewables. It's the science, you know, it's an obvious. And on that note of power, electricity. I would also say something that's really important in cities is transports. In South Africa, our transport systems are not safe, they're not reliable. And so this is preventing many people who live far away from the city to having access to job opportunities. And even within the Western Cape over the last few weeks, we've seen how damaged our transport system is and how it's affecting people's ability to work. And then just to move to social justice and economic opportunities from there, particularly in South Africa, the South African context is still the remnants of apartheid. And so if we just look at the spatial layout of cities like Cape Town, you generally have white middle-class people living near the CBD and poorer people of color living far away from economic opportunities. And that needs to change. That is not a sustainable city by any means. So there are amazing movements in Cape Town, like the Occupy movement, which is a movement that's trying to help people that live far out from the city to move them into unused government buildings and claim them. And I've seen one of their locations, and it's such a diverse, energized space that's really amazing. So those are just some of the factors that you would need to consider to analyze whether a city is sustainable or not.
And what do you think on, because I feel like this is like a parallel question, like it literally mirrors each other. Because you're speaking, for instance, about electricity, and like you said, it's almost like people don't have the passion for climate change because maybe they're hungry. Like you said, maybe they don't have power. I have a friend who lives in Joburg in Soweto, and for like 2 months now, her complex has not had electricity because of cable theft and all those things. So for her to then have to think about preserving the environment, it's something that's like far away from her thoughts at this moment. So what would you say are some of the factors that are almost kind of working against or kind of hindering us, perhaps that we should maybe even look at in a preventative manner when thinking of designing sustainable cities in the future?
Sure, that's a loaded question. But so you're right on the money there. It's really impossible for people to be thinking about something that's going to happen, in the next few centuries when they are struggling to feed their family. Having said this, Africa has contributed the least to climate change, but is going to be most affected by its implications, which is, I think, one of the biggest injustices of history. But some things to take into consideration if you want to design a sustainable city. I would say to first approach whatever challenge you're trying to solve a problem for with an asset-based view rather than a needs-based view. And essentially what that means is you are looking at what is already existing in the space. So instead of looking at it with a lack, or they don't have this, they don't have that, looking at it with, these are the skills that already exist. These are the networks that already exist. These are the existing resources. And how do I, as a designer or city planner, now take all of those things and amplify them in a way that solves problems for these people? And then another key thing is, I think designer arrogance is a real thing. And so often designers have this perspective of, I'm going to come in, I know everything, and I'm going to solve this problem for these people. But the real reality is those people are living that experience every single day, and they know this issue better than anyone else. So really the role of a designer or city planner is to go in, listen with empathy, listen deeply to what the people's experiences and needs are, and then work in relation with them throughout the process to design solutions. And this is going to provide more resilient solutions in the end. And then also to ensure that once the project is done or a building development is finished, that you, as a designer or an urban planner, to go back and reassess how the situation is a few months later, a year later, a few years later, you know, and make adjustments afterwards. Because I think so many projects are, they're finalized and the people leave, and that's it. Yeah. And then also to have a holistic approach to understand the complex relationship between politics, economics, social factors, the way that we are, unfortunately, most people are educated in school and university is in these silos. So you learn science, you learn humanities, you learn medicine, you know, and so you come into a problem only from that perspective. And I think when we're dealing with highly complex challenges, we need to have a more holistic approach. So that can come from being trained in that way or working in a team of diversity of people with different backgrounds.
I like that last point that you made. I think sometimes the issue is, and this is slightly off topic, but I think the one thing that is challenging a lot of our cities or a lot of our local governments, even nationally, is that the departments each have their own mandate.
Yes.
There isn't like, this is the government's mandate and this is what we're doing as a government, this is your role, blah, blah, blah. It's usually social development is doing this and that's all that social development is doing and health is doing this. But how do we then bring the two together to actually contribute, or like you're saying, to leverage on the resources that we have to actually build sustainable cities? And in the same vein of, do you want to add something on that?
No, I just absolutely agree. I wish there was more communication between the different departments, and I've spoken to many people working for the City of Cape Town municipality, and they just have the same critiques all the time. It's like they never get an opportunity to communicate with the other departments, and these issues are cross-cutting issues. They're not like, it's not just this is your thing and this is your thing. We're past the date of linear thinking. That's gone out the window now, and we're never going to be able to solve these issues if we keep thinking and working like that.
It's so true. So in the same vein of thinking between collaboration, I mean, one would not necessarily put security or food systems and sustainable cities in one sentence. So I found that very interesting. So what are the linkages between the two phenomena in, like, specifically in an African context? Like you said, we may be the most affected in the near future. So what is the correlation between those two?
I think there's many correlations, but I'll focus on one, and I think that is the way that the effects of urbanization and mass monoculture agriculture is that it's creating a distinct distance between people and nature. So when people move into the cities, they really lose touch with their essence almost, you know. If we look at how indigenous or traditional communities live, they live very much amongst nature, and day to day they can see the changes from season to season, or, you know, when animals come, and they can see these subtle changes. When you live in the hustle and bustle in the city, you don't notice anything like that. And it's the same with this disconnect to food, is that now we just go to the shops and we go that and that, put it in our basket and pay for it and leave. We never meet the farmers. We never see the animals that get slaughtered. So we have literally no connection to those systems at all. And so there is there's a ignorance that comes with that, because then it's much easier to exploit nature or animals or whatever it may be, when you don't have any connection to it, So you see this lovely steak, and by the way, I'm not vegetarian, but you see this lovely steak and you're, oh, that looks so nice. But you don't see the story that comes behind that, whether it be the farmers, the animal's life, all of those things. So I think both of these trends have caused this disconnect between us, other people, and nature. And this is quite detrimental to if we want to move to a more sustainable world, we need to see these things for what they are in a transparent way to really understand the impacts that we're having.
I don't know if this is even a fair question to ask you, but do you think that it's attainable? Do you think food security and sustainable cities in an African context, do you think that is attainable?
Oh, 100%. I mean, why would I be here if I didn't believe that? I mean, there's definitely days throughout my studies where I get into that negative space and I feel like I should just walk away. But I see so much potential for the African continent. As I said in the intro, we have this amazing opportunity to look at the mistakes of the past and develop differently. So we don't even need to go through an industrial revolution. We can just transition straight to renewable energies, straight to more just, sustainable cities. But we have to take that opportunity ourselves. It's not just going to happen for us. And I also think there's an inferiority complex within Africa. I might be wrong. This is just my feelings, is that we're often looking to the West for solutions and guidance, when we have got all the skills we need right here, and we know our land better than anyone. So we need to develop our cities, our technology, our education systems, all of that in a way that makes sense for our context.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think the reason why I was asking you that is because usually when you get into like an activist mindset, or when you get into a space where you want to fix, sometimes it's almost as though we are managing problems. You know what I mean? And I just wanted, I wanted to hear that come out from your mouth, that yeah, we can actually get to that place. And it's not that we're hopeless. I mean, not only do we have all the knowledge and skills and everything we need, we actually have the resources that the West is using. We are their resource hub. They getting from us. So of course we can do it. But another thing that I've another thing that I've picked up in especially the South African context, I think I may be generalizing, but there's sort of like an entitlement, right? So maybe like a discipline is going to come in and fix the things, and then the government's going to come in and give us jobs, and so is going to come in and teach us how to farm or how to build gardens. So there's almost like we're always waiting for someone to come and save us, right? And I understand that these bodies have to be held accountable because they are there for these reasons. But what can the everyday person, what everyday actions can one start today, start right now after this webinar? What can I start to do that will contribute towards, say, food security and the sustainability of my immediate city?
Yeah, I think you raise a good point there, and I just want to also be transparent and honest. I'm coming from a white perspective in an African context, and so my perspective I'm going to share now is just an opinion and what I've noticed. This is not facts, but I think that the effects of apartheid, essentially what happened was that it killed people's sense of self, and it killed people's confidence in their abilities. So I think that it left people very hopeless. People had their land taken away from them, and were completely relocated. And that I think on a psychological level does something to someone. So again, I don't know, this is not really my place to talk, but I just in terms of everyday people's ability to make change, I think that it comes from feeling like they are powerful enough to do that. Firstly, once they realize that, the capabilities are really endless, especially when we're working in collaboration with one another. Unfortunately, Western architecture has built homes like this, ching, ching, with fences between them. That's not how African architecture originally was, where people lived in circles, and it was based on so much community engagement. Now we live in isolation from one another, so collaboration is a little bit more challenging now. But yeah, so I've been volunteering with the Scarborough Environmental Group, and it's been really amazing to see the capacity that one small community has to build systems for themselves with very little money, but just time and dedication to the thing. But yeah, in terms of food security specifically, I would say that the best thing that anyone can do is support local farmers. That's the number one thing. Essentially, when you support local farmers for your own benefit, you know where your food comes from, and you know the quality of that food. But also, you're providing opportunities, or you're providing finances to social entrepreneurs who employ other people as well. And you are reducing carbon emissions because the farms are closer to home. They don't need the produce doesn't need to travel as far as it would from big farms outside of the city. So that would be my first thing. And then also to start growing your own food. And I say this not because I think that's going to solve food security, because no one can grow everything that they need on, within a city. But I say that because, again, I think growing your own things makes your appreciation for the process of farming and food so much better. And I think that's something that we really need to get right, is that we need to acknowledge how precious all of the resources that we have are. And the only way we're going to know that is actually by getting our hands dirty and getting involved in those things. It was only by climbing a landfill in Stellenbosch that I realized, wow, we actually have a huge landfill crisis. I'm standing on the top of a trash mountain. This is crazy. So it's really like getting out there and actually seeing where things come from.
I'm actually still also like hung up, not necessarily hung up because it's not the right word, but my mind is still kind of caught by your introduction in answering this question, that I speak from a white perspective and perhaps it's not my place. And I think that well, you'll correct me, but I think one of the reasons why sustainability and climate change and all these things have been and I don't wanna make it sound cliche or generalized, because I know vegetarian and vegan Black people who champion for it and who advocate for it. I know a lot of all the young people that I know who have like home farms are Black. I genuinely don't know none of my white friends have like a backyard garden. Like I'm even now looking over my window to my dad's backyard garden. So that people do that. They do that a lot, right? But it's
Yes.
almost seen as though climate change is like the white struggle. It's usually seen as that. And I think the problem is that we are a bit, I think it's still an awkward conversation to bridge the two races, or to merge and kind of work together or speak together on any given topic. So I think that it's actually commendable, one, that you acknowledge your standpoint or your background, the way you come from. But I think it's important, from a personal perspective, I think it's important that these conversations be had across the races because, like I'm saying, Black people are planting their own food, but they're not necessarily looking at it as, oh, I'm saving the planet, right? And then, like I'm telling you, like maybe my white friends would be more like, okay, I have 3 bins in my house, like cans, organic waste, and paper, or like blah, blah. But then they literally just they eat and throw everything everywhere. You can see what I mean? So I think we need to start having, like you said, holistic conversations. Like, what does that look like in your context, and how does it differ to mine? And how can we work together? Do you understand what I mean? But yeah, this is like
Absolutely.
an observation that I have.
I would,
Do you
I
have
would love
any
to.
thoughts on that?
What was that last point? Sorry.
No, I was asking, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I have many thoughts. So what's interesting is when we talk about sustainability, there's many perspectives on what that means, right? So
Yeah.
I this like vegan, I'm not doing plastic straws, cotton bag, that trend is, yes, I'm all for more sustainable options for consumers, but you need to look at your whole lifestyle. Just changing from a plastic straw to a metal straw is not enough. And also then, as you said, you have people that grow up in more rural areas, and they grow their own food and they have chickens and whatnot, and that's not labeled sustainable. So this comes down for me very much to the effects of colonization. So white European people came here, they had an agenda, and they pushed it on the people that were living here. And what I find, so people living in South Africa at the time were living very much in harmony with nature. Then you have Europeans coming in and changing their lifestyles to ones that are less sustainable. And now you see the claiming of the word sustainability by European scholars. And this gets under my skin because it's like you came as colonizers and you told people this is not how they should live. And now years later, you're claiming it as your own knowledge. And I have a big problem with that. And I also think the word sustainability has been very tainted by the white experience. And so, yeah, I want to just smash that right now because, yeah, we need to change that narrative around just because you do recycling, like it doesn't mean you're saving the planet, Yeah, sorry. This is also a challenging, just to be honest, a challenging topic for me to talk about, but I do want to talk about it. As you said, it's important. It is tricky though. It is a hard one.
Yeah, and I mean, all kinds of activism activations are pretty difficult to talk about. And I think that's an important thing to note. And I just want to maybe take like a step back. Well, before I do that, I just want to encourage everyone who is with us on the Zoom, share your thoughts on the chat. We're not leaving you behind, although we're having so much fun talking. We still also want to hear your opinions. And if, oh, we're not live on Facebook, I almost said if you are watching us on Facebook, but yeah, if you're watching this afterwards, you're watching it on YouTube or watching it on Facebook, please do just share your thoughts in the comment section. Let us know what are you doing to help sustain our world, and also in a more central sense, like what are you doing to like contribute towards the sustainability of your city and food security. So yeah, what I wanted to say was that just going back to the very beginning, where we mentioned issues like gender-based violence and all that, I think what usually happens sometimes, and I don't want anybody to be lost. I think maybe I should have said this like way earlier. I don't want anyone to be lost in a this is more important than that debate,
Mm,
because I feel like if there is no world for us to live in, then we won't have freedom as women. If there is no food, for and that's another thing. Can of worms alert. That's another thing. A lot of women, like one of the contributing factors to gender-based violence is that women depend on the perpetrator, right? So the
mm,
perpetrator is providing for them in terms of like what they go eat, where do they stay, what they going to wear. So it's more of a you cannot bite the hand that feeds you type of vibe. So it's a very interlinked issue with every other thing that we're facing. So if people were more aware of how to grow their own food, for instance, perhaps they would have more freedom. And I'm not saying that's the main issue, but perhaps they have more freedom to actually leave those toxic relationships and situations.
mm,
So I just wanted to clear the air there to say it's not to say that, oh, this is more important than that. But as people, we are living a holistic experience. Our whole lives are on this earth. So it's based on what we eat, what we drink, like you said, it's those everyday elements, electricity, food, water, shelter that form part of how we create this week.
mm.
So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, definitely. What I'd like to add is that one of my lecturers, it was one of the most amazing lectures I've ever had, because she showed us this triangle, and essentially at the top was white men, and right at the bottom you had women, trans people, nature, and people of color. And so, you know that picture, the Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci, where like the guy that's like this in the circle? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so that image
Yes.
came okay, that image came out at the time that modern science was born, and so that was the perspective, that was the image of the so-called perfect being. So he was on his own, there was no nature around him, a white man. And so anything other than that was deemed as less than. So nature, woman, people of color. And through colonization, that narrative entered the rest of the world. And so, as much as climate change and gender-based violence seem so far removed, it's in fact the same perspectives and narratives that have led us to these places. So exploiting women, exploiting nature.
Sure. I've never actually thought of it like that. That's actually like a mind blowing perspective to think of it as. And I think the other thing that you mentioned is that it's almost like the immediate hate, right? That's caused by each of these evils, if for lack of a better word. So gender-based violence is you slap me, it's painful right now, right? So I immediately feel passionate because I immediately see the harm that you are doing to me in this moment. But actually, it's whether it's even abuse in and of itself is like a long-term process. Like you don't slap me today and then I'm like, oh my God, you slapped me, but I'm gonna stay with you. But if it's something that happens over time, I get then conditioned to being a victim or being a survivor, or however my story ends. All that I'm trying to say is that you're making me think, like that statement makes me think that actually I may be more passionate about this because it's heard today. But what I don't see is that the evils are the same. Like it's all a sense of kind of undermining what is other, right? It's a
Yes.
sense of putting down what is other. And the world is not other to anybody. The universe, the earth is not other to anybody because we all need it. Like we literally need nature to take care of us. So sure, it's mind blowing. I'm gonna recycle. My niece was shouting at me yesterday for throwing away paper. I'm gonna recycle now.
Yay!
Yay! No, I'm really gonna recycle. And I'm just checking. We don't have anything on the chat, so I don't want to keep you here forever because I can. And this topic really, like you've opened my mind to seeing sustainability and basically the preservation of our world, the preservation of our home, our earth, in a different sense. It's not just a manner of let's prevent the bad things from happening, but it's let's protect what we value type of vibe. So I'm really, really grateful for this session. I don't know if you have any parting shots that you'd like to leave with us who still need to be evangelized. But what would you say to a friend that is asking you that, like, why is this so important, or what else would you like to give to the youth of Africa?
Mm. Yeah, well, first of all, it's been amazing to talk to you, and I'm very, very grateful to be here. I think I would say that there's just so much beauty in nature, and all of our ancestors used to live in close proximity with nature. That's how we used to live and survive, and through colonization and these various movements that have happened in history, we've slowly detached from nature, and I think from one another as well. I mean, COVID-19 has taken it to another level. But we have so much depression, we have so much anxiety, we have all of these mental health issues arising more and more each year. You have to ask yourself why. It's because we are meant to be close to nature. And so that would be my message. And also, I would want my children to one day be able to see the things that I've seen in the world. I remember going snorkeling in Madagascar with my family in 2015 and just thinking, wow, this is so beautiful, but I don't know if my child will ever see what I'm seeing right now. There's just so much magic in nature, and it's so giving. You know, you plant a seed and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. It's the most beautiful thing. And I think we need to remember that again.
Yeah, so wow, Hannah, thank you. Thank you once again for making this time, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. Yeah, thank you for taking the time to be with us, and thanks to everyone who's watching this later. Please remember to leave a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are, and let us know how. Because last week, was it last week? Was a previous webinar before this? We were talking about marketing, and the the speaker was speaking about like TikTok and trends like that, and how they are very instrumental in getting information to younger people and just getting their attention on certain things. So yeah, if you are an influencer, you're watching this, talk about it. If you care about it, talk about it with your followers, and you may never know how far it will go. So yeah, I believe that we can change the world on conversation at a time, really. So again, thank you so much. Have a lovely day further, and hopefully we will see you again soon.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.